I'm here by the River Thames in the beautiful village of Datchet. It's hard to believe on a day such as today, when it all looks so benign and beautiful, that the river can enter to people's homes and businesses and completely annihilate them. I'm going to meet with Sue, who lives in a lower ground floor flat. Now, Sue had just bought her flat and was arriving to measure up for curtains, and she was horrified to find the entire village was under floodwater, and the only way she could get to her flat was by a boat.
Hi Mary.
Sue, thank you so much for allowing me to come to your home today.
Not a problem.
You've got quite an unusual story to tell, because when you bought your flat, you knew it was at low risk of flooding.
I did.
And you were going to make adaptations, but the River Thames had other plans for you, didn't it? Do you want to tell me about it?
Indeed it did. Well, I deal with risk management in my day-to-day life because that's the job that I do, and I would always make a full risk assessment of anything that I do. I have a balanced approach to risk, so when it came out in the search that this place was in a area that's at risk of flooding, I thought to myself, well, here's a challenge. You know, I can take the property as it is and make it more resilient and keep the water out. I also did a lot of research as to the flooding history of this particular area, and it transpired that the village had not flooded since 1947. I thought, well, you know, I can live with that. Of course, it was the most difficult year in terms of flooding in the southeast for quite some time, and we had rain that started in December and then it just didn't stop. But to cut an awfully long story short, I exchanged contracts on the 7th of February, and a severe flood warning was slapped on the area on the Sunday, which was the 9th of February. I'd arranged to meet with the estate agent on the Monday morning to measure up for curtains, and was greeted with what looked like Armageddon. You know, I'd never seen anything like it in my life. I'd seen flooded areas and flooded villages and on the TV, but until you actually see it for yourself, and with all of these journalists that you recognise from the BBC News trying to speak to you, and particularly when I was talking to the other villagers and they heard about my story, you know, I had to be very, very careful about talking to people about it, because I was still trying to take in the enormity of what had actually happened. And I met the estate agent. Obviously we got in before the flood water came as far as my property, even though I'd had to get a boat to get into the road, and it was okay. We thought, well, maybe we'll be fine, but then later in the day the water started to seep in. I thought, well, what am I going to do? So we went out and bought some submersible pumps and just continued to try and keep the water out, and that went on until the Thursday, when they opened the sluice gates down at Staines and the water just drained away. And, you know, I was moving into the property, or well, I wasn't, as the case may be, but I had to put in an insurance claim and get alternative accommodation sorted out. And then there was the challenge of how to make the place more resilient. And I didn't really know where to start, even though I'd spoken to some consultants who could have come and done a very detailed survey for me. And then I saw you on the telly, and I sent you an email, and we had a few conversations, and you gave me some very good pointers as to how to do things. And, you know, we had some very useful and constructive conversations, and as part of the general repair, which was being done by the insurers, you know, I used that as an opportunity to put in the flood resistance and resilience measures as well.
So you've done two things, really.
Correct.
I call it a good belt and braces job.
Yes.
So you've concentrated on trying to keep the water out.
Correct.
But also acknowledging, if the water does get in, that the moves you've taken will reduce the impact the flood will have.
That's correct.
So could you show me what you've done to initially just try to keep the water out?
Okay, well, in terms of keeping the water out, I've done a number of things. The point of entry was my front door, and the water had come up not through the floor of my property, but through an outhouse outside the property where the floor is not concrete. So the first thing that I did was I installed 2 sump pumps in that outhouse, one as a backup in case the other one failed. So that was my first line of defence. And those pumps can just throw out water at a fair old lick, so I'm fairly confident in that. The second thing that I did as a second line of defence was, because the water had come through the front door, was I bought a kite marked front door, and you know, they're not quite as functional as perhaps people think they are. You can actually get some very nice ones that are quite aesthetically pleasing. So the front door I've got actually looks nice as well, and it's also incredibly secure because it's a multi-point locking system within the door as well. So not only is it mega secure, but it keeps the water out as well, and it's got several lines of defence embedded within it, with it being a kite mark door. I also have that looked at and serviced most years, nearly every year, and at the same time we test the pumps as well. So that's what I've done to the front of the property. At the rear of the property, we've got the drains that work for the whole of the house. So what I've done, because I got a little bit of water through the back door, is I've put in non-return valves as well. So what they do is they push the problem away from my property, and so I don't get the flooding in my courtyard at the back. So that's what I've done at the rear of the property. And what I've also done is I've bought a clip-on flood guard as well that just clips on very, very easily onto the back of the door, and I always have that on when I'm away from the property.
So let's talk about what you did to your bathroom as well, because obviously being flooded has really traumatised you, and you've gone absolutely out of your way to stop yourself having to go through this as well.
Right, yes.
So if you can tell me what you've done to your bathroom and actually to your downstairs toilet too.
All right, so what I've done to the downstairs toilets, I mean, they're already protected by the non-return valves outside, but what I've also done is I've invested in some toilet bungs that will go down the toilets, and you just pump them up with a bicycle pump, and they will stop any backflow. Again, as a third line of defence, if you will. So I always put those in. They're incredibly cheap as well, so they're very easy to get hold of. So I have one of those for each of my toilets. What I also have is a storeroom off my main bathroom, which was another source of ingress of water. And so what I've got is an expandable door as well, which I just slip on and it expands. And again, that can be installed within about 10 seconds. So if any water were to come through there, then that would be an extra line of defence.
But
yes,
we're all aware that flooding is getting worse, and your flood door may get overtopped, the barrier may get overtopped, everything may be just compromised from the sheer volume of water.
That's
and
right.
flood water, in the worst case scenario, will get into your home. So what have you done to minimise the impact a flood would have on your home?
Okay, so what I've done in terms of that is I have got tile floors virtually throughout the property, with waterproof grout as well. Apart from my bedrooms, where I like to have some carpet, but that's fine because it's not particularly expensive carpet, and I've deliberately done that. I've also, at somebody's advice, painted all of my skirting boards with varnish rather than paint.
So you've got solid wood skirting boards.
Solid wood skirting boards, solid wood kitchen units as well. What I've also got is an internal puddle sucker, which is a very powerful internal pump with a big pipe that I think it will suck water away from about 2 millimetres. So if the water did get in, I'd be able to expel it from the property very, very quickly. So in terms of the repair, that was all part and parcel of the insurance claim, and it wasn't anything additional because the insurance will only indemnify you and put you back to where you are. But I used the opportunity to build back better, if you will. And
how about the plaster? Is that waterproof?
that was already waterproof.
That was already waterproof.
It was.
That was lucky.
Well, because this is a lower ground floor flat, it was plastered with waterproof plaster quite some time ago. So I didn't actually need any replastering done because the water only came up to about 5 inches, which was round about the skirting board level. So luckily the plaster wasn't compromised in any way.
You've got a lovely looking home.
Thank you.
Flood resilience isn't ugly. A lot of people seem to think if we make our home flood resilient, it's going to look ugly. you can dispel that fact, can't you? Because your home is stunning, isn't it?
Thank you. I like to think so, yes, and particularly, as I said earlier, those flood doors, you know, look very nice. You know, if you look around, you can buy the basic functional ones, but you can also buy the aesthetically pleasing ones.
It's just great to come and see my advice actually in you know, I can touch it and feel it and feel quite responsible, but hey.
Absolutely, and luckily it hasn't been put to the test yet, but you know, it's one of the things that's with all of this stuff is, you know, you're making plans you never have to use, but it's having those plans and that resilience and in place and that readiness that just gives you the peace of mind that you know that even if it did happen again, that you'd be in a much better place to deal with it.
Absolutely, you really would. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.